Thank God it's Friday. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Business Morning here on Channels Television. I'm Ini John McQuarrie. Let's do business. We'll start from the global space. As usual, oil prices rebounded on Friday to recover some of their more than 1% losses in the previous session, partly because of diminishing prospects of a quick end to the Ukraine war that could bring back more Russian energy supplies. We see Brent this morning is up at 46 cents. That's about 0.7%, and is at $70.34 a barrel, while WTI is 67 cents, 3 cents. $67.03 after it gained 0.7%. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that Moscow will, supported by United States proposal for a ceasefire in Ukraine in principle, but sought a number of clarifications and conditions that appear to rule out a quick end to the fighting. However, the global trade war that has roiled financial markets and raised recession fears is escalating, with the U.S. President Donald Trump on Thursday threatening to slap a 200% tariff on wine and other alcohol imports from Europe. The International Energy Agency has warned that global oil supply could exceed demand by around 600,000 barrels per day this year. That's because of growth led by the United States and weaker than expected global demand. Well, still in the oil space now, Nigeria's average daily crude oil production declined to 1.46 million barrels per day in February. This is according to the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. In its latest monthly markets report, the current output signifies a 4.8% decrease from the 1.53 million barrels per day that was recorded in January. And this is the first month-on-month output decline in the year. With the current production volume, the global oil body says Nigeria retained its position as the biggest oil producer on the continent, with Algeria taking second position, producing 912,000 barrels output. Now, let's talk about this and some other issues in the oil and gas area with the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Flame Academy and Consulting Limited, Mr. Oju Demezue. Mr. Demezue, good morning.
Morning, Amy. How are you doing today?
Good, and you?
Yeah, we can see that, the world economy is, at some point of uncertainty, but I hope that things will settle out.
Well, we hope so, but I think the more worrying one for us would be this, seeing that oil output, just when we wanted to start rejoicing that FX,
2 million,
yes, because we have 2 million, so we saw from 1.5 plus of last month to 1.4. We don't know what's bringing this. Are there renewed activities, for instance, around the crude?
Well, it's a slight drop, so it could be accounted for production uncertainties and all of that. I don't see any major crisis causing this. The only concern we have right now is that with the issue they have in Rivers State, some people are already threatening that if somebody is removed illegally, Nigeria will suffer severe consequences. And what goes to my mind when they say that is that we will begin to disrupt our oil operations again. And I hope and pray that the president will use his wisdom to calm that storm in Rivers State. Yeah,
we do hope so. And there's, of course, also the issue with local refiners and crude for Naira policy and all of that. That's also been brewing. And the NNPC had said, well, the initial agreement is that it expires by the end of this month.
Yeah.
So, the chairman
availability is going to be a challenge, because you know that Nigeria, quite unfortunately, had taken some loans in the past backed by our crude production. At the same time, it's very important that we supply crude to our major refiner right now. And of course, I'm sure we'll get on to that at some point, that we have other major refiners coming up. Our own Oando that's making waves outside Nigeria. I hope that space will be opened up for people like Oando to also support Dangote to make sure we refine enough crude, whether they get supply from NNPC, crude oil here, or they have to get from the global market. By the way, we expect that the global oil prices might trend downwards over time.
Yeah, that's what they said. As Russia comes in with their
Russia is resolved, Hamas is already being resolved, and all those geopolitical tension around there, and obstacles in the Strait of Hormuz and other passageways for oil, you see the supply getting bigger. And of course, Donald Trump, my good friend, has promised that America will surely pump out more oil. I don't know how Nigeria will be affected by that, but I know that Abuja may not be very happy as oil prices may go down below our budget benchmark. But you and I will feel the impact in a lower pump price of petrol.
Okay, well, you mentioned O&O, and I think a couple of days ago we heard that they won a bid to run a refinery in Trinidad,
doing solidly well for themselves.
And their shares have been dropping, but yesterday we saw there was a bit of a gain.
I will come to that. You know, when investors don't understand some fundamental parameters for investing, they take short-term steps, and it tends to affect some companies negatively. But Wando, having gone beyond Nigeria now to get this, preferred bidding right for the Guacara refining
in Trinidad and Tobago.
Asset, in Trinidad and Tobago, it's a great step, a boost of a show of confidence that Nigerian local companies are beginning to gain international recognition for their technical competence and all of that. And remember, Wando just acquired 100%, almost $1 billion of NAOC assets, Agric, after you know it in Nigeria. Recently, that was the news last year, and that's a very great step they took in becoming a great player in the upstream sector of that, of the oil and gas sector. And that means that this company has a great power to make wealth in the future, to create, because the assets are huge, pipelines, oil wells, loading bays and all of that, gas plants, and so many things, flow stations. All right, now, they have also gone in the other side, the downstream, to strengthen their capacity to trade. Logistics, technicalities in oil trade, moving to the Caribbean. Strengthening the Afro-Caribbean collaboration.
We're hoping they will have a refinery in Nigeria first anyway.
The politics of Nigerian oil and gas.
Let's increase the mix.
They are going to get there, I assure you. What I see Wando doing is a deliberate step to increase the capacity, not just in one side of the sector, but downstream and upstream. Now they have settled with the upstream, even though the cash inflow for them will start coming soon. It's already showing in their results. And then now downstream, by doing this, they're going to have a very strong, synergy, with their productive capacity. So there will be an off-taker advantage. They have a refining capacity in Trinidad and Tobago, and they have upstream capacity down here. So, that way, the confidence people have in them, both in Africa and in fact globally, will go quite up. And before you know it, they may start being invited, because getting to Trinidad and Tobago is just like a contract that would have been given to an American or British company. They are getting it. So what am I saying here? The future of the company is looking very bright. When you talked about their share price going down from last year,
it's been dropping, but yesterday,
low, up. What's going on is that this company is going through a very tough investment stage where they have to spend money. So what they did was, instead of giving cash dividend to their shareholders, they offered stock dividend. That's what you call bonus shares, where they give out their shares for free to shareholders in place of cash, because at this point the company needs all the cash to be able to ramp up their activities both in the upstream and downstream. So naturally, when people get stock dividend, they feel like, oh, this is free lunches. The company has given me, I had 1 million units of their shares. They've given me 200,000 for free. Let me go and enjoy this money. I cannot kill myself. So that's the feeling. And once they are selling off the shares that way, the shares will tend to drop down. But give a few moments, a few weeks or months, people who understand investing will know that this is the best time to not just hold on to your shares, but also even invest more. Again, remember that the second batch of that stock dividend will happen June 30. So if you hold on a little while, you will have more bonus. Don't go selling out the one you have, because you're going to get more by June 30 if you meet your deadline because those who are in the books, as at the close of book by June 30, will get even more. They only gave 641 million. In February, they're going to give another 641 million in June 30, and that will only come for those who are holding on to their shares. And beyond that, when they finish this script issue, the real business is going to start both in Trinidad and Tobago, and of course, they already started ramping up the asset use in Nigeria. What's going to happen? The amount of revenue, in fact, already all the factors, all the parameters are looking up. Revenue is going up, hugely, from their upstream activity, and of course, profitability is also ramping up. What do you judge when you want to buy a company's shares? You look at the future cash inflows. That's why I'm saying, when investors have a long-term view, you find that Wando is a stock that will do wonders in the future. So holding on to it will, be a great advantage to those who hold on, who buy right now or who hold on right now.
Okay, but Mr. Demeze, for those who are not investors in O&O, we are concerned about the price at the pump. We are concerned about the availability of petroleum products in the country. Oando is also a player in this. What goodies or largesse can we expect from them? Because it's not just about the stock market.
With their stepping up beyond Nigeria to African stage, and of course the Caribbean, you find that they're going to command bigger respect, they're going to close bigger deals, that of course will improve their business even down here in Nigeria. So I believe that once the level playing ground is established here, they will do more business and earn more. And that's why I'm saying that for those who invest in the company, the future is very bright. And the price of a stock today should be what you call in finance, the present value of the cumulative future inflows, which if you factor in what it's going to be, the price today should be much more than what it is right now. But let me not people have to decide to invest, how they want to invest.
Yes, exactly.
But one for me is making Nigeria and Africa very proud. And I'm looking for money seriously. I should be able to invest as quickly as possible.
All right, Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of Flame Academy and Consulting Limited, Mr. Ojidemezue, thank you so much.
Always my pleasure. Thanks so much, Ini.
Good to have you.
You guys are doing so well here. Keep it up. Once in a while, call us to enjoy this money we see. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ojidemezue. All right, so outside the oil and gas right there, the NCC, the Nigerian Communications Commission, they say they are determined to ensure that internet connectivity goes to the unserved and underserved. And that was the crux of the matter at their latest meeting, which was held in Lagos. It's an industry-focused stakeholders engagement session to elaborate and enlighten all concerned about the Universal Service Provision Fund, USPF, by the Nigerian Communications Commission. For the Executive Vice Chairman of the NCC, Dr. Aminu Maida, this engagement themed strengthening partnership for sustainable telecommunication infrastructure in the unserved and underserved communities, collaborating for sustainable growth, reflects collective commitment to ensure equitable access to telecommunication services for all Nigerians, especially those who are underserved.
I am confident that the deliberations from this engagement will lead to actionable solutions that will derive progress, foster economic development, and ultimately transform lives through connectivity in most remote corners of our nation. Together, we can build a future where digital connectivity is a fundamental right, not a privilege. Let us remain steadfast in our commitment to ensuring that no community is left in the digital dark.
The Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Mr. Bosun Tijani, is a major stakeholder, and for him, the USPF should give priority to upskilling if it will be successful.
Bridging the digital divide is not a task for government alone. Sustainable and impactful progress requires strong partnership across both public and private sector. To access the internet is only beneficial if people have the skill set to productively use the access. Therefore, ensuring that digital literacy programs, skills training, and entrepreneurship development are integrated into our overall investment in infrastructure and connectivity strategy is also an important focus.
The meeting is expected to provide valuable insights and strategies that can be adopted to enhance USPF interventions and serve as a feedback mechanism to build partnerships for Nigeria's digital future. Yeah, that's the Nigerian Communications Commission. They're working on how, well, everyone in Nigeria, they say they don't want to see it, they don't want it to be seen as a luxury or a privilege. It should be everybody's right in the country to be able to get connectivity, whether you're in the rural part of the country or in the urban part. And that's what they say that program is all about. Well, I guess the program sounds good, but getting it done, but is another thing, and that's why they say that they had that meeting, bringing together stakeholders, everyone in the value chain, from the telecoms company, to everyone who's going to even consume it. at least represented in that meeting. Well, we're going to talk about the prices of food. We see it's trending down. At least that's a report that we're hearing from different parts of Nigeria. Is it sustainable? Can we hope that it will stay that way? We'll have that conversation after this break. Do stay with us here on Business Morning. So the price of food items in Nigeria is trending down. That's the news from different parts. And I mean, every Tuesday, Thursdays especially, we do show you the numbers right here. Can we sustain it? And of course, as expected, we've heard government officials count it as one of the gains of the reforms by the President Bola Tinubu administration. Is it sustainable? That's what we should be asking. That's what the Director General of Agribusiness Center is joining us to discuss. So right here we have Dr. Philip Nto. He is the Director General of Agribusiness Center at the University of Agriculture, Umudike. He's also an Associate Professor at the Michael Okpara University of Agriculture, Umudike. Thank you so much, Dr. Nto, for your time, and welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So would you say it is justified that the decline in price of some food items in the country can be credited to the reforms of this present administration?
Well, I would say that the price of food materials are increasing. If you check from the statistics presented by National Bureau of Statistics, I think food prices are increasing up to 40%. So you can't say the price of food items are dropping. They are not declining. They are rather increasing, because there are not things that you can say this is something that will make you to say that it will come down in the nearest future, because production is not moving to match the consumption. So price of food items, they are not dropping, they are not declining. And that is my take on that.
Okay, so you said because production is not meeting up with demand, but we see a lot of government policy, at least here, a lot of government policies, and see some efforts which they put together. Are you saying they are not effective enough, or they are not what we should be doing?
There is a mismatch in the government policy formulation. There are certain things that are not taken into consideration, like the value chain is not taken into consideration. The policy is more of end at production rather than value chain. And you see every year we lose up to $9 billion to post-harvest losses, which if you convert is more than 14 trillion naira, which is big enough to offset our budgetary deficit. So by implication, our problem is not the production. Our problem is the post-harvest losses. We don't formulate policies in value addition. We rather formulate just last within. We don't add value. You don't think of how you can process. The price drop will just be within that period when there is market glut. And when there is market glut, the price will drop, which is merely artificial. It's not sustainable. But if you want the price to be sustained at a particular rate, what you will do is to add value. Let me take, for instance, at a certain period, you see tomato everywhere. At a certain period, you see onions everywhere, orange everywhere, cassava everywhere. The price at that period, because there is a glut, will drop. But for government, I will advise that the best thing will be for government to formulate policies where value will be added to all those items. Like if it's tomato, you now process them so that they can last beyond the production period. If it's orange, you process them, you add value. If it's palm oil or this thing, you process, add value so that it can last for a longer period. But if you don't do that, what may likely happen is that within that period, there will be high supply and there will be low demand. And at that particular period, the price will drop. Just within that period of less than a month or two, because just take, for instance, maize. Maize is only for a period. During the period of production, the price will drop. but after that it will rise. So my advice is that for government to formulate policies that will now ensure that the value is added. So at that period when there is market glut, then those they will be acquired and then processed. If it's something like maize, it will be processed into flour that will last a longer period. If it's tomato, you process them into tomato paste. If it's orange, you process them into orange juice, which can last a longer period. Even yam. But if you allow them within that period, it means you will just buy your yam, buy your tomato, buy your orange, and the rest of them. Eat them within that period. After a while, we still go back to square zero and start to suffer our normal period food insecurity.
Yeah, but Dr. Anso, do we need government policy for that? Wouldn't you say that perhaps the private sector could come in? We hear of commodity boards, you know, and commodity exchanges. Shouldn't private sector come in and see this as a sort of investment? Because, I mean, obviously there'll be profits made out of it.
Yeah, for me, I think that the best is to be a multifaceted approach, where the government, the private sector will come together, all the stakeholders will come together. Let me give you one example. You see National Assembly members, Federal House members, they do what they call empowerment in their constituencies. For me, what government should do is to say, okay, since we have over 9 billion naira that you lost through post-harvest issues, the best will be let each community has a particular crop which they have comparative advantage over others. Let me say tomato or cassava. If your constituency has a comparative advantage in the production of cassava, then use that money that they use in doing empowerment to set up a factory. When you set up factory, then you now maybe get microfinance bank that will be an off-taker that will buy from the farmers, they process them, and then sell to the final consumer. With that, the person will create jobs, and then the wealth will be sustained in that particular constituency. Rather than giving them the empowerment, maybe you share them keke, share them motorcycle, share them all this and that. But if you set up a agricultural product processing plant, which is very cheap, and then get a microfinance bank within that locality, or get any private sector person or somebody to be an off-taker. The person will move around the farms and then off-take the agricultural products and then send them to the factory. The factory will now process and then sell to the final consumers. By implication, the farmer is given money to continue with his production. One thing that is peculiar with Nigeria is that our farmers don't know much about value addition. And given that they don't know much about value addition, they only produce and send to the market. And from the process of producing from the farm, they Medicare. Most of them experience one different form of accident or the other. But if there is an off-taker that can buy those things from the farmer, process them in the same locality, and then sell them to where they are needed, you've discovered that food will be there, employment will be provided, so many things. You have taken care of solved so many problems. I think that is the way government policy should go, rather than encouraging production only. When you encourage production without thinking of what will happen to the value, what value added to what is produced, you find out that there will be a market glut, and the whole food produced within that period will be wasted. That is why we have that up to 14 trillion agricultural products wasted every year, which can make a lot of people millionaires. I see many millionaires tapping from that, not even from ICT, not from oil company, but from the agricultural sector. It's just for them to now say, okay, this 14 million, how can I tap from it? How to tap from me is that, okay, at the point of production, you can say, okay, what you do is to now set up a transportation company, because most of these things, you must carry them under a conducive condition, low temperature. You now carry them from the farm to where they are needed. You have created job. You can also, like you see tomato, when they are harvested, they are poured into a jute bag or sack bag, which cannot be sustained for a long period. So I think the best thing would be for people, private sector, to take advantage of that and then tap from it. Because I know that with that, jobs are created. That is my position on that.
All right, Dr. Onto, I'm glad you talked about the need for knowledge and enlightenment, and of course it should come from the private sector. And talking about jobs there, you are in, the University of Agriculture. You have young youths there, people who are almost out of school. How much of this knowledge and consciousness, of this part of agriculture, how much do you impute in the students who are in you?
The network is dropping. Please, can you come again? It's dropping.
Okay, can you hear me now, Dr. Onto? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I was asking, you are in a University of Agriculture. How much of this knowledge and consciousness of this side value adding into agricultural produce, how much of that do you put in your students or those who are still there, those who are about to leave, so that as they leave, they don't need to go and look for jobs, they can actually just plug themselves in these missing gaps in the value chain?
Yeah, I didn't hear you correctly because the network dropped at a certain point. But I think the question you asked is the role of the university. In our own university, Vice Chancellor Professor Madu Iwe set up, because with the mandate of the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, set up Agribusiness Incubation Center. The whole idea is that the center will be a hub where you can now train the rural farmers on value chain, so that you don't just produce your product, you also add value to them. Let me give you one, like potato. Potato can be converted to so many things. Research done by our university staff has shown that you can produce so many things. Even before, we used to think that you can only produce bread from wheat, from other flour. But you can produce bread from potato. You can produce bread from cocoyam. You can produce, and so many other things. So in our university, that is the essence of the Agribusiness Incubation Center, where products of research are passed down to the farmers. So from there, since there is a missing link between the production and value chain, from there the university is trying to bridge the gap, so that whatever that is produced, you don't just eat it within that period. It will now be processed, where they can even last up to a year or so.
All right, interesting, Dr. Onto, and we do hope, that maybe more schools will be more practical in all of this. But for you now, since you said, the price of food items from your perspective are not declining, and so we cannot even attach it to the reforms of the government, which a lot of government officials have been heard saying, what do you think we should do at this point in Nigeria? You talked about the issue of post-harvest losses, adding of value to production so that it can be stored and kept for a longer time. What should be the immediate steps at this time to help bring these things that you have highlighted?
Like I said before, the thing government policy should be around value addition now, not production. If you check, the idea of production is as old as the colonial policies, where agricultural products are only produced and exported to Europe and America, where they will now be processed. After that, they sell it back to us. So that is why then not much was done about value addition. But in the current period, we should talk about value addition, because the decline you will only have in a particular period is seasonal, based on the seasonality of the crop that is produced. If it is during the period of rice production, you see price of rice will drop. But when government add value that will now increase the shelf life, you find out that rice will last throughout the period. If it's tomato, it will last throughout the period. If it's onions, it will last throughout the period. So But government policy should be centered on agribusiness value chain rather than production. And also, yes, production is also important, because if you emphasize more on value chain without talking about production, you see a situation where there will not be enough raw materials to process. Just like that is why that would take me to what is happening in some places where insecurity has chased away so many farmers. Like in the north and in the south, you have communal clashes. In the north, you have banditry, Boko Haram, and the rest of them. Many farmers are now living in the IDP camps. So there should also be policy. I'm quite impressed with the 2025 budget, where much fund is devoted to fight insecurity. That is a good step, because that money indirectly is also has a direct bearing with agriculture. I can see that the next in line in that order is infrastructure, which means if there is infrastructure, you can easily move your agricultural products on a motorable road. And also, most of these things are perishable. You can easily process them. There will be incessant, there will be energy that will help most of these farmers to process their crops. I think there is need for private sector collaboration in all these things, not just government alone. Private sector should also come in. When I say private sector should come in, is that, like I said, every year we lose up to 14 trillion naira. People can develop business opportunities around that, and then create wealth where people can be employed in their factories, in their businesses, in their enterprises. So it's not just government, it should be all-encompassing.
All right, Dr. Phillips Nto, the Director General of Agribusiness Center at Michael Okpara University of Agriculture. Umudike, thank you so much for your perspective this morning.
Thank you very much.
Now, we talk about insurance, and sometimes it does seem like insurance is just about vehicles, but it's beyond that. Well, stakeholders in the insurance sector say they are sustaining the economy, and they have a large part to play in attaining the 1 trillion naira economy.
Insurance is also what enables economies.
The insurance sector has become more vibrant since the reinforcement of regulation on vehicle third-party policy. More could be expected as members of the sector hold this forum to discuss the role of insurance in economic recovery.
Oftentimes what people hear is the big investors, but they do not bother that how are those big investors standing? It's the insurance sector that keeps them standing. So, and that is the role we are meant to play, right? We take all of those risks and allow them to venture. And that is where we become very relevant as the economic stability and risk management factor that we represent. Also in terms of wealth and asset protection, and then giving confidence to our investors to be able to perform.
Insurance keeps businesses in all sectors, and the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry connects all.
How the insurance industry can contribute a lot more to the economy, because without insurance, you cannot have an economy. All these big businesses being built, they cannot be built if there is no insurance. All the vehicles on the road cannot move unless they are insurance. They cannot be replaced if anything happens to them. So the whole conversation today is how to make the insurance industry bigger and much more effective in contributing their role to the growth of the economy.
The finance and insurance sector's real gross domestic product rose to 30.83% in the third quarter of 2024 on the tight monetary stance of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Players in the sector are hoping that conversations like this will boost the sector's offerings and growth.
Now let's talk about Nigeria's carbon markets. It's a system for buying and selling carbon credits to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the market is intended to help the country meet its climate change goals and expand its tax base. Currently, Nigeria receives approximately $250 million annually underscoring the need to boost both demand and supply to unlock additional funds. The scope of Nigeria's carbon market encompasses various sectors. Renewable energy is what comes to the mind first, but agriculture is also part of it. Let's talk more about this with the founder and chief executive officer of NetZens in Sustainability Limited, Dr. Sadiq Sani. Dr. Sani joins us from our Abuja studio. Dr. Sani, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Ini. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. So we talk about climate change, emissions, and all of that. Now we're discussing Nigeria's carbon market. And I just wonder how much or how many Nigerians you think are really conscious of, the fact that there's a carbon market, there's something about emissions and all.
The consciousness in terms of the emission reduction in Nigeria is really high. And the Nigerian government, the private sector, civil society are actively working hard towards ensuring that we reduce the amount of emission in the country, and then we contribute to the ongoing effort globally towards climate change. And then furthermore as well, if we look at NetZens, for example, we have built the first of a kind innovative technology, which we call closed carbon. So closed carbon is a technology that tracks, that monitors, and also manage carbon in real time and on-site. And the furthermore as well is it brings incentives in form of carbon credit to the facilities that are actively reducing emission. And that is why when you look at the effort in terms of the federal government launching our technology sometime in August last year, specifically launched by the President, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, represented by the Minister of Science, Innovation and Technology. The technology has been widely accepted across the country and beyond. And then you can also see what we are actually doing with environmental health, ECON in Nigeria, and also AMAC, which we are actively working together to track emission in Abuja and see how we can cut across the other part of the country. So there's a lot of effort ongoing across the country, collaboratively to see how we can actively reduce emission in real time.
Yeah, so I like to connect to everyday life and everyday work when we talk about emissions reduction, the goals and the consciousness. You're working with the government to ensure this happens. Where is it? Who are those who are participating? How is this being practiced every day, on the job, at home and all that? I guess that's what will make it effective to reach this goal.
Yeah, so if we look at the goals in terms of what the government and also NetZens we've actively been doing, together, and also in terms of NetZens projects, we have condition, reduction, which by 2030, there is a certain amount of emission that would have to be reduced by facilities across the country. And also we also have the unconditional reduction as well, which also supports overall emission reduction across the country. And then also we've seen a lot of support in terms of the federal government, the National Council on Climate Change, the establishment, to drive, climate action in the country. And that we've also seen, the Nigerians' contribution, the NDC, towards also reducing emission, and also, the ensuring that the Paris Agreement is adequately being carried out. Because if we look at overall, last year, the amount of, emission, or in terms of the temperature rise, going, above, 1.5, and then, and that is 2025, so it's something that, the goal of the country, or the goal, of the government, including, companies like NetZens, is to see how we can collectively, be able to at least, eradicate, this climate change. And that is one of the major goals, that is a major goal of NetZens, to eradicate, climate change. However, when we look at the grassroots, there are certain issues in terms of, individuals, end users being able to understand what emission reduction is all about, or what climate action is all about. And this is one of the reasons why, when you look at the closed carbon technology we have built, we have what we call the closed carbon reduction tool. The closed carbon reduction tool is an incentive driven by NextZens and given to facilities that are actively reducing emission. And at the end, we are not just leaving you with the carbon credit or the carbon incentive you have, but you can monetize that carbon credit or in the form of carbon incentive on closed carbon, to get some monetary value, in real time. And then from there, the end users as well will be able to buy into the CCRT, which is a closed carbon reduction tool, and also have a say in the way emission is actually being reduced, in the country. And at the end of the day, you can actually see how your investment into the CCRT can yield profit overall to every end user in the country. And then we've also seen in terms of the awareness from NextZens, the training across government organizations like ECON, the active ongoing activities with AMAC, across Abuja, to see how we can support the goal of NextZens towards eradicating climate change, including the goal of the government in terms of contributing to the Paris Agreement and also the Nigeria's nationally determined contribution.
I believe that Nigerians will be very much interested in that, how to monetize that carbon incentive. How does that work? We know, for instance, in Lagos State, there's a similar program that's going on. So how does this work?
Thank you, Ini. So what we have done in terms of the incentive coming from NextZens is we are working with both the state government, the federal government, to provide the platform, the technology in which your carbon incentive or your carbon credit can be monetized in real time. So what happened is, if you have a form of a carbon credit, the carbon credit is converted into the closed carbon reduction tool, which is a CCRT. The CCRT comes in the form of monetary value, which again, you can get on the closed carbon platform in real time. And then the end users as well will be able to buy into the CCRT and see how they can actually get some return in their investment. So what NextZens is doing is to have the platform in which the state government, the federal government, the private entities can actually log in what they have in terms of the emission reduction, which we collect actively from our devices. So taking back, when we look at the value chain, we have our devices which we have built, embedded systems, 6 devices which we install in facilities to get the data in real time, because we've seen issues in terms of falsifying data emission, transparency, these are major problems, we have seen auditability issues when it comes to the actual emission. And this is what we have built our devices for, to get the data in real time, which is available on our blockchain technology, supported by the NextZens AI, in which it does error detection, error correction, to ensure that any form of falsifying data is actively mitigated, because no individual can add or remove data that has been collected from the devices. It goes to the blockchain we have, and automatically every facility would actually see the amount of emission it has in real time. So in terms of the government, the state government, we walk into the facilities, we install our devices, and then the magic starts from there. At the end of the day, depending on how much of emission you have reduced, it gets converted into the CCRT. From the CCRT, automatically, you can monetize that emission in real time. And then furthermore, the end users can also now have access to the CCRT, in which they can buy into it, have a say towards what every facility or what every government is doing in terms of the emission reduction. So for us at NextZens is to provide the technology in which the state government, in which the federal government and every other facilities in the country can use to ensure that you have a much more better transparency, auditability, fault tolerance, and also trust in the emission data coming across your facility or overall in the country. And that is why when you look at coast carbon, it has been termed, for example, as the carbon registry. And in Nigeria, you can term it as the Nigerian's carbon registry because we're cutting across the other countries. NESENS is in Ghana. In April, we're starting, fully in Ghana. And then we are also moving across the entire countries because in Africa and globally, because our goal is to eradicate, climate change. So providing that technology that would ensure that the state government, for example, we're already speaking with Lagos government, we're already speaking with a lot of other governments to see how we can actually help them with our devices, both the hardware, the software platform, to see how we can actively eradicate this, emission and provide a much more better informed decision when it comes to the investment coming into the climate, change overall.
All right, Dr. Sadiq Sani, founder and chief executive officer of NetSense Sustainability Limited. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ini.
Let's take a break now. When we come back from that break, it's to the global space with Will Ibon. Stay with us. Welcome back to Business Morning on Channels TV. Let's find out what's happening in the global space. Will, good morning.
Good morning, Nini. A lot is happening, especially in the UK, where we saw that GDP drop unexpectedly. But let's just take a look at it very quickly. Now we see in the UK, the economy contracted by 0.1% in January, a sharp drop from December's 0.4% growth and below expectations. This increases pressure on the Bank of England to sustain monetary easing. Annual growth slowed to 1%, down from 1.5% in December. GDP per head also fell by 0.1% in the last quarter of 2024, signaling weak economic momentum despite avoiding a recession. With inflation at 3% above the bank's 2% target, balancing growth and rising prices remain a challenge. The central bank has also cut its 2025 growth forecast to 0.75%. Now, Germany's inflation rate fell to 2.6% in February, lower than the initial estimate of 2.8%. The Federal Statistics Office confirmed this on Friday. Now, month-on-month inflation was also adjusted down from 0.6% to 0.5%. The office did not provide a reason for the revision. The data, harmonized to EU standards, indicates a slight easing in price pressures, offering some relief amid economic uncertainties. And the Bank of Thailand has maintained its policy interest rate at 2%, stating it is appropriate for the current economic climate, according to the bank's governor. Despite forecasting growth slightly above 2.5% this year, the governor of the Bank of Thailand acknowledged this rate is not ideal, stressing the need for long-term economic solutions. The central bank prioritizes stability over frequent rate changes, focusing on sustainable strategies rather than the short-term boosts. And Japan's largest labor union group, Rengo, has announced a 5.46% wage increase, the biggest in 34 years, as companies respond to rising living costs and record corporate profits. The wage hike surpasses last year's final figure of 5.1% and reflects efforts to support smaller firms struggling with cost pressures. Despite the pay rise, economists remain cautious about its impact on consumer spending, as inflation hit 4% in January, the highest in 2 years. Now to the U.S., former U.S. diplomat Wendy Cutler warns that Trump's tariffs could push allies towards stronger trade ties with China and India. This follows the EU's decision to impose counter tariffs on $28.3 billion worth of U.S. goods in response to earlier U.S. steel and aluminum duties. The EU is already expanding trade links, finalizing a major deal with Mercosur nations and reviving negotiations with India. These moves could reduce U.S. influence in global trade. Experts say the Mercosur deal eliminates tariffs on over 90% of trade, benefiting European exporters while disadvantaging U.S. and Japanese goods in South American markets. Still in the U.S., U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent dismissed concerns over President Trump's threat to impose 200% tariffs on European alcohol, saying it should have little impact on markets. Mr. Bessent downplayed the move, calling it a minor issue for Wall Street. Trump's warning comes after the EU announced a 50% tariff on U.S. whiskey set for April the 1st in retaliation for Trump's 25% duties on steel and aluminum. In a Truth Social post, Trump accused the EU of exploiting the U.S. through unfair trade policies. Mr. Bessent declined to say whether Trump's tariff announcement was premeditated. Meanwhile, U.S. stock indexes continued their decline, driven by uncertainty over Trump trade policies. European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde cautions that a global trade war will severely impact U.S. economic growth while strengthening European unity. Speaking in an interview, she says such conflicts would drive up prices and slow trade with the U.S., bearing the heaviest consequences. Her comments follows escalating tensions after President Trump threatened a 200% tariff on European alcohol in response to the EU's 50% tariff on U.S. whiskey. The EU imposed these duties after Trump's 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum took effect on Wednesday. Lagarde suggested while these disputes pose risk, they also serve as a wake-up call for Europe. Meanwhile, the EU remains firm, describing U.S. tariffs as unjustified and responding with levies on $28 billion worth of American goods set to take effect in April. Now, automaker BMW's revenue dropped 8.4% to 142.4 billion euros in 2024, with profit before tax falling to 35.8% to 10.97 billion euros. Lower sales, pricing pressures, and weaker demand in China contributed to the decline. Tariffs added to the strain, with EU duties on Chinese EVs and new U.S.-China trade barriers increasing costs and disrupting production. Competition from domestic EV makers further hurt BMW's performance in China's premium segment. While European sales and EV deliveries grew slightly, profit margins remained a challenge. BMW expects a small rise in deliveries for 2025, driven by new model launches. And finally, Pan-European Commercial Bank UniCredit has secured approval from the European Central Bank to acquire up to 29.9% of Commerzbank, a move that could lead to one of Europe's biggest banking takeovers. While the ECB's approval was expected, UniCredit still needs clearance from Germany's competition authority before converting its derivatives into shares. Germany's government and Commerzbank's management have vowed to resist any takeover, setting up a potential battle over control of the Frankfurt-based bank. And those are the news from the global space. Ini, that's all we have. So exciting what's happening in the global economy. And we're hoping that we'll see more analysis, breakdown of how these tariffs is going to impact so many, economies, especially Africa, because I wonder how we're going to, deal with the hike in prices.
Yes, and whatever happens to the dollar, of course, affects us. But I think the most interesting at this time, at least for now, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 1 hour, is the 200% on alcohol by President Trump. I wonder if that's going to be implemented. I mean, when I heard it yesterday, I was like, 200%. Wow. I think he wants to stop consumption of alcohol in the United States.
To be,
yes, I think that's what he's trying to do.
Yes, I guess that's his motive and strategy. We'll watch and see.
All right, let's do it again at 1 p.m. Okay. And yes, it's the end of the show, but yesterday the NGX recovered. Hopefully that will be sustained when we come your way during Business Incorporated at 1 p.m. It will be myself and Will. I'll see you then.